The plan required the destruction of all existing governments and religions. This objective was to be reached by dividing the masses, whom he termed goyim, meaning the human cattle, into opposing camps in ever-increasing numbers on political, racial, social, economic, and other issues. The opposing sides were then to be armed, and an incident provided which would cause them to fight and weaken themselves as they destroyed national governments and religious institutions. In 1776, Weishaupt organized the Illuminati to put the plot into execution. The word Illuminati is derived from Lucifer and means holders of the light. Using the lie that his objective was to bring about a one-world government, to enable men with proven mental ability to govern the world, he recruited about 2,000 followers. These included the most intelligent men in the field of arts and letters, education, the sciences, finance, and industry. He then established lodges of the Grand Orient to be their secret headquarters. Weishaupt's revised plan required his Illuminati to do the following things to help them accomplish their purpose. 1. Use monetary and sex bribery to obtain control of people already occupying positions in high places in the various levels of all governments and other fields of human endeavor. Once an influential person had fallen for the lies, deceits, and temptations of the Illuminati, they were to be held in bondage by application of political and other forms of blackmail and threats of financial ruin, public exposure, and physical harm, and even death to themselves and their loved ones. We're going to take these a point at a time. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you what's going on in this country today. This is a recent headline, not too recent, 1989, June the 30th, 1989. Power broker served drugs, sex at parties bugged for blackmail. Here's another headline. Homosexual prostitution probe ensnarls the fissures of the Bush and Reagan administration. Top Japanese politician linked to Spence. Craig Spence was a CIA operative. He was exposed as a CIA operative. His job was to set up dignitaries, politicians, congressmen, etc., and to blackmail them. Once he was exposed, of course, he didn't last too long. He lasted something like 6 months. Within 6 months, I think he was suicided. Now, recently, it's sometimes referred to as Arkancided, by the way. Not Spence, though. This was before Mr. Bill Clinton was in the White House. But in my experience as a private investigator, security consultant over the last 17 years, I've had a number of high-profile cases in addition to the Jeffrey McDonald case. And I'm happy to report I've had a phenomenal success record on it. It takes a lot of time, a lot of diligence, and the right contacts in order to be successful in this field. But in 1989, I was contacted by a gentleman by the name of Ed Weaver, a wonderful Christian man in Lincoln, Nebraska. And he had read about me in a book called The Ultimate Evil by Maury Terry. The Ultimate Evil was a story about the Son of Sam murders in New York. And Maury Terry wrote the book. He contacted me on the West Coast, asked me to help him do the research on it, et cetera, which I did. Involved on the West Coast the murder of a producer named Roy Radin. And I'm happy to report that the people who were responsible for his contract murder or contract killing of Roy Radin are in jail today. There's 4 of them, serving all 4 of them serving life sentences with no parole. And I'm also happy to report that I had a little bit something to do with putting them in jail for the rest of their lives. But as a result of my name appearing in the book The Ultimate Evil, Ed called me and said, you know, are you the same Ted Gunderson that went to Lincoln High School in Lincoln, Nebraska, and went to the University of Nebraska? And I said, I am. He said, well, I'm Ed Weaver, and I was your classmate, and of course I remembered him. But he said, we have a real problem here in Nebraska. We have a case called the Franklin Cover-Up, and in this particular case, the FBI and the IRS raided the Franklin Credit Bureau, which was a credit bureaus established in the minority neighborhood in order to furnish banking and financial opportunities to the minorities. People on the board of directors included people like Harold Anderson, who was past publisher of the Omaha World Herald, other very prominent citizens. And as a result of the raid, there was publicity. Larry King, by the way, was the individual who was president of the Savings and Loan. Not Larry King, live CNN, but Larry King, a black man, a fast-rising star in the Republican Party, had sung the national anthem in Texas at the Republican National Convention and New Orleans at the Republican National Convention. As a result of the publicity, there were 80 children in Omaha came forward and talked about being exposed and ritualistically and sexually victims of this element, this group of people. These were some of the leading businessmen in Omaha. These kids named not only Harold Anderson, but they also named Bob Wadman, chief of police, as being involved in this ring. They named Gene Mahoney, past former vice squad with the Omaha, vice detective with the Omaha Vice Squad, Omaha, Nebraska, and he's now head of the Forestry Service for the state, has a park named after him between Lincoln and Omaha. They named the editor of the society page of the Omaha World Herald. They named the heir to the Brandeis fortune. I mean, these were top citizens, highly respected people in the community. And of these 80 children that came forward, 4 of them gave statements. Of the 4 who gave statements, 2 of them later recanted, probably under pressure. 2 refused to recant, Alicia Owens and Paul Benassi. And actually, what happened with Paul, they feel like they apparently discredited him because he had been convicted of child molestation. Alicia Owens claimed that she had sex with Bob Wadman, chief of police, when she was 14 years old. She told the grand jury that. And as a result, they tried her for perjury before the grand jury, and she was convicted. As far as I'm concerned, I attended the trial, a day of the trial, and it was a kangaroo court. There's no question in my mind. But this was the situation, and in discussing the matter, I did go back to Nebraska, of course, after talking to Ed, and I'm telling you right now about my experience there in talking to Paul and Alicia and so forth. But in talking to Paul, he gave me a number of signed statements. By the way, Gary Caradori, the investigator before me, died in an airplane crash coming out of Chicago. He had called they had a state Senate committee that was organized for the purpose of checking into this situation, this child sexual ring. And he had called the Senator, Lawrence Schmidt from Chicago. He was sent back there on a lead. Called Senator Schmidt, and said, I have the goods right now. They cannot get out of it. He got on an airplane that night, and the plane crashed outside of Chicago, about an hour and a half out of Chicago. And his briefcase is missing, and the back seat of the plane is missing. They claim that he had engine trouble and the plane disintegrated, but there was a farmer who saw a flash of fire and light, and he felt that it was very obvious to me and obvious to anybody else that there was probably a bomb in the plane. I can't prove it. This is what is being spread and thought about at the present time, and has been for some time. But anyway, Gary Caradori had done a great job on the case. I was not replacing him in full because I couldn't work full-time on it. I had a business in California. But in talking to Paul Benassi, he told me about the number of times when he and others were taken out of schools, private schools in Omaha, driven by limousine to Sioux City, Iowa, and placed on private jets and flown to Washington, D.C. for sex orgy parties with congressmen and senators. Paul told me, and has drawn from me, the living quarters of the White House. The public's not allowed in the living quarters of the White House. There's no question in my mind Paul is telling the truth. But in addition to this, he talked about an organized child kidnapping ring, which I will discuss later on in the lecture. We'll discuss that in the second half, by the way. But this is your documentation. This is what I'm saying. And by the way, Paul knew Craig Spence, knew him very closely, and had worked with Craig in setting some of these politicians up. So then we come back to the second point, and number 2 starts here. Illuminati on the faculties of colleges and universities were to recommend students possessing exceptional mental ability, belonging to well-bred families with international learnings for special training in internationalism,